Pashindet here and welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. This week I have two special guests. I'm joined by Alban Bala. Alban has started a very interesting business in the UK to do with the housing market. However, we're going to be discussing the challenges facing the housing market in Albania, the high prices and all this talk of a bubble. We're also going to be talking about entrepreneurship in Albania versus in the UK. Then I'm joined by Aid Klulo. Now, Aid Klulo is a former journalist and an author who was also a member of the British Army. He was stationed in Kosovo in 2008 and 2009 and was involved with KFOR and the setting up of Kosovo's new security forces. He's written a book that I have read, which is explosive. It's just been translated into Albanian and will be published soon, but it lifts the lid on the mistakes that were made by internationals during this crucial time in Kosovo's history. And it provides a lot of context on the problems that still persist today. Okay, so my next guest, Aid Klulo, MBA, is a British former journalist. Now, he is an author and a former UK Army officer stationed in Kosovo for 6 months between 2008 and 2009, a very crucial moment in the country's history. He was a part of the Kosovo Protection Corps. He worked with the commander of the Kosovo Protection Corps on behalf of the UK and NATO and was providing strategic advice and guidance at a time when the KPC was deactivated and the security force was established. Now, he's written a book about his time in Kosovo called Under a Feathered Sky. I've read it several times. This is not my first time interviewing him either, but it really is a fascinating read. It's about to be translated and published in Albanian as well. And it really sheds light on what went on at that crucial time in Kosovo's history, what went on, what went wrong, what went right. And it helps us, I think for me anyway, it provides a bit of context on sort of how what happened then has caused some of the mess we find ourselves in today. Aid, welcome to Inside Albania.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alice. It's great to be here. Really good to be here.
And I mean, our first interview now, I think it was in the pandemic sort of time, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was a while ago. I mean, and so much that time.
Yeah, so much, especially in the sort of Kosovo news cycle. You know, there's never a dull moment there. Now, I want to dive in. Your book, Under a Feathered Sky, you write in it that, and I'm paraphrasing massively, but that KFOR and various people involved in it did not really do everything that needed to be done in the right way to help form the Kosovo security force. And I don't want you to give away sort of the main points of your book or anything, but can you talk about this a bit? Why would they do that? Why were they not wanting to see Kosovo sort of flourish in this respect? And what vested interests were at play here?
Well, it really, that's such a big question. And it goes to the very heart of the book. And I deployed there in August 2008. I had no intention at all of ever writing a book, ever, about anything. I mean, it just didn't even really come into my mind. But within 2 or 3 weeks, I realized that what I was witnessing or likely to be witnessing was really book-worthy. And it was like a switch just changed in my mind. I knew I needed to do something about it because I was just so surprised at the attitude of the senior members of KFOR towards the Kosovans and towards those people who I was embedded with and was obviously getting to know at that stage. And, you know, as a British officer, Britain has a very strong connection with Kosovo. Of course, we that goes, you know, right back to the intervention in 1999 and thereafter. So I found myself really the premise of the book is that I found myself, on the one hand, being told by my KFOR leadership, no, you're a liaison officer, sit in the corner quietly, just make notes, come and report back what you're seeing and hearing, compared to, frankly, what I was always going to do as a British officer, which was to get involved, to do what I could to help the people I was working with. And as it turned out, to sort of, in a sense, shield them from some of the decisions that were being made, so that and help them navigate some of those sort of decisions and those orders that were coming down from KFOR headquarters. And in the end, the premise of the book is I had that choice, and I chose to essentially ignore what I was being told to do, and I did what I felt was the right thing to do.
Did that get you into any trouble?
Some, yes. The 6 months that I was there tells that story, of course, and the book tells. And there were so many technical elements to what happened. The Declaration of Independence then set the timer on the Kosovo Protection Corps closing. The KFOR leadership needed to make some very quick decisions about that. They didn't. They compressed the timelines, which then put pressure on the formation of the Kosovo Security Force, which was happening at the same time. And it was a real mess. And I was absolutely part of it. And as I said, on the one hand, trying to steer and guide the Kosovo Protection Corps through what was coming down from KFOR, but at the same time, I was still having to do that role and be that very strong connection with KFOR headquarters and the Kosovo Protection Corps, because the people who were essentially going to be forming the nucleus of the new security force, they were having to go through a selection process to be considered for that. And so pressure was everywhere. And so, yes, when towards the end, as ever, with great stories, towards the end, things started fraying a little bit at the seams. And yes, I think anybody who reads the book will see that I've been really honest about the impact that 6 months had on me, but also the impact that I knew I was operating essentially off reservation. But I did that knowingly.
When I read the book, I felt this frustration and it's the same frustration that I feel when I hear things about that I feel when we're talking about Kosovo today, when we're hearing about what's going on and what KFOR has said, or what the EU has said, or what the US has said, or oh, you have to do this, you can't do this, you can't. And I feel this frustration. I feel like there's people sort of standing in the way of progress, and through maybe nefarious reasons, but also ignorance as well, not really understanding the situation or having their own political interests of things. And I felt that same frustration that I do when I read the news sometimes about what's going on in Kosovo. I wanted to ask you as well now, do you think there are still issues within KFOR? I mean, I know this is speculation, but do you see things have improved? Do you think it really has Kosovo's interests at heart? I mean, we had that situation in the north not last September, the September before, where there was nearly a huge terrorist attack, and it happened under the noses of KFOR. So I'm wondering, what's your perception of their role now?
Oh, I think they've got a really important role to play in the country, and they've got a very important role to play in terms of deterrence. And I think because it's a much slimmed down organisation now compared to when I was there, there were thousands more troops on the ground when I was there, and unnecessarily so in my view. And I think I've said that I said that in the book. But they have a very important role. But also at the same time, the Kosovo Security Force, which started with such relative humble beginnings, and you've read the book, so you know how it was on day one. Really, they've turned themselves into an incredibly professional force, and so much so that their individuals are attending overseas training courses and becoming top student, for example. They have had instructors joining other really very well-known militaries, delivering support in the effort towards supporting Ukraine. And so there's a recognition that the quality of the individuals in the Kosovo Security Force is really very high and is getting better all the time. And you're right, it is speculation. I'm not serving with KFOR, and I'm not in regular contact with that force, but their role is to support the Kosovo Security Force in whatever ways they can. And you just need to look at the Kosovo Security Force to know that they're receiving an awful lot of support from individual nations. And so I think as a story, KFOR is very important to Kosovo, and they recognise that role. But equally, the Kosovans are also taking responsibility themselves with what they are doing in the security force. It's a very well-led organization with some really good, bright people in it.
When we look at Kosovo now, I mean, 2008 independence, it's still struggling. I mean, EU membership just seems so far away. It's still struggling with recognition from some countries. NATO membership, I mean, it wants to be part of NATO, but realistically, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I'm wondering what you think of this progress, the involvement of the EU and the US. You know, obviously they were a fundamental part of giving Kosovo the strength to move forward, to be independent, but it seems everything's sort of ground to a bit of a halt now. How do you see progress over the last almost 20 years?
Well, again, this is a really, really question, isn't it? And there are some real rabbit holes that one could go down, I think, to answer this. Let me just go back to a time where I can absolutely speak with first-hand knowledge, and that was when I arrived in Kosovo. It was I think I even wrote the words in the book that it felt like it was sinking under the weight of international attention. There were so many international organizations deployed in Kosovo that and many of them not even recognizing Kosovo itself, and member states that had deployed, particularly military organizations that had deployed forces there, who didn't even recognize Kosovo themselves. So, 2008, 2009, there was Spanish military personnel working inside KFOR, but they didn't recognize Kosovo. So in other words, the point being, and this comes out, I think, in the book, KFOR and therefore Kosovo as a whole was so political. And so when you are dealing with a organization that some didn't even recognize, you're never really going to have an honesty in that sort of set of relationships. And so I think, what the EU has been trying to do, and other leading nations like the US, of course, it's almost like an impasse. And it's almost as if we've reached a point now where nothing is going to change until almost generationally things change. But the decision or the announcement recently that the EU's special representative for the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia is changing, I think that's welcome. I think it's welcome that it's going to be in the hands of somebody who isn't in some way compromised towards one side of the two. And so, at least that, for me, when I read that, that's positive. And so let's hope for the future. Let's hope that egos put aside, and personal interests can be set to one side, and that we can start to make some progress. But it is a thing. It's never going to reverse. Kosovo is never going to be part of Serbia again. And so we need to get on with that within that framework.
I think it was, it was a situation where you had the high representative of all foreign diplomacy for the EU being Spanish. Miroslav Lajčák, from a country who has no interest in recognizing Kosovo. Oliver Varhelyi as well. Peter Stano, who just used to say terrible, terrible things about Kosovo almost on a daily basis. And he was like, how can this, one would hope that they would be able to put their national sort of and personal beliefs to one side, but it's no wonder things stalled. When we saw things like Kosovo being slapped with sanctions, which are still in place, sanctions, they don't like to call them sanctions, measures, for example. And I just thought it was really, really unfair. Especially, I kept thinking, do you people know what happens in Kosovo? Like, do you know where it is? Have you been there, like really been there? And I had a comment like this from an MEP as well, and she said, I think these people, they just don't really understand what went on there. I was in Jakova in November, and I did a documentary on, I interviewed the families of people who were massacred there during the war, just after the NATO bombing. And it was horrific. I mean, it was so traumatizing and deeply upsetting. And the thing I heard from everyone I spoke to was that they're so worried that this could ever happen. They're worried that this could happen again. They're worried if they establish an association of Serb communities that this will give them power and they might, try. They're worried it's going to happen. They're like, there's been no justice, there's been no apology. They deny it. Now they want autonomy in the country. They're scared of this. And this is something which people sat in Brussels would have no idea about. They don't understand. They think it's just Albin Kurti being, tough or, not doing as he's told. But I don't think they understand the real fears of voters. And I guess maybe you have some first-hand experience of that. You were on the ground there. You've met people, spoken to people who were directly impacted as well. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. But yes.
No. And so I can give you two examples actually from different times. So again, when you read the book, you'll know that I ended up going slightly off reservation, way beyond where I should have been, in civilian clothes, ending up in a Serb bar. We had an absolutely great evening, and they were delightful hosts, even if they didn't realize quite who we were. And it was a really great memory from my 6 months to have done that. And as I say, I absolutely shouldn't have been there. I became an honorary US diplomat for the evening, and that was all good. But when I came back to Kosovo in 2018 to research the final chapter, what I really wanted to do was meet all the people who I had been working with before, working alongside before, or who I had interacted with. So a couple of ex-prime ministers, one of whom was the prime minister then in 2018, Ramush Haradinaj, but many others as well. And one of the trips that I wanted to make was to go into North Mitrovica, because of course I couldn't have gone before. Yeah. I absolutely wasn't going to cross the line or go over the bridge. So I went north with a friend of mine who took me there, and we sat in on the pedestrian walkway in North Mitrovica, the road, the pathway that led down to the bridge, with a senior member of the police force who was greeting Serbs who were walking past, regularly throughout our conversation. And it became really clear to me that at that time, so this is a point in time, most Serbs, and this is through what he was saying, of course, but most Serbs just really wanted to get on with the rest of their lives. Yeah. They accepted the realpolitik that they were Serbs, but they lived in Kosovo, but they just wanted to get on having a peaceful, productive life. Yes. Everything that we all kind of hope for. There are Serbs who live in North Mitrovica who are part of the Kosovo security force. That multi-ethnic security force that represents the entirety of Kosovo. Yet those ethnic Serbs who are part of that force have been threatened that if they cross the border and go into Serbia, they'll be arrested. Yes. And so, essentially what I'm saying is that I got the impression that really, when it comes down to it, at a human to human level, people just want to get along, and yes. There are those animosities, and clearly what happened before, nobody wants to go back to that. But of course there is a small minority who are clearly acting on instruction from elsewhere. And it's when that flares up that suddenly everybody just assumes that every single person in North Mitrovica is anti-ethnic Albanian. Yes. And I don't. It's not the case. I do not believe that.
I've heard exactly the same thing, firsthand as well, from Serbs from that region recently. I mean, in the last months, we just want to get on with things. A lot of the fuss that's made is made for political reasons, and they're not speaking on behalf of us, basically. So, yeah, it's the same situation now. Now, you are familiar with previous Albanians of Kosovo. If you read the book, people will get to hear a lot more about that. What about Prime Minister Albin Kurti? He's been somewhat polarizing, not within Kosovo as such, but internationally. People in Brussels have told me, we don't know what to do with him. He doesn't do as he's told. He just takes decisions. He's headstrong. These are the very characteristics I like about him personally. But I'm wondering, in the context of your experience in Kosovo, How do you assess his leadership in navigating the challenges that Kosovo has faced? Should he have cowed to sort of international pressure a bit more, or is he doing the right thing?
That's a great question, Alice. I, I nearly met him when I was deployed in Kosovo, and at the time he was leading Vetvendosia. He was standing on the back of lorries, commanding thousands of people, huge crowds when he was speaking. And I went out and watched some of these rallies that he held in the time that I was there. And he's always had that leadership, and he's always had that sort of sense of what he believes is right and wrong. And I go back to my earlier point about Kosovo sort of sinking under the weight of international supervision. And that's, culturally, that's quite a thing to lose. And so when the international just expects people to kowtow, to do what they're told, and suddenly somebody stands up and says, actually, this is what I think is right for the country. I'm an elected representative, and this is what we're going to do. Of course, that's going to ruffle feathers, because up until that point, there'd been a lot more compliance. And again, that stems from the fact that the international community, in all its guises, for right or for wrong, definitely helped Kosovo get on its feet when it needed that help most. And we mustn't forget that. But every organization, every country, it goes through change, and it goes through periods of evolving, and go back to perhaps the great graffiti that was seen, across Pristina when I was there. The no negotiation banner that was sprayed on so many buildings and so on from Vetvendosia, and that sense of self-determination, and that sort of sense of we're going to make some decisions. Now, yes, of course you can take that view, and I think there's also room for listening and compromise as well. I mean, every political leader knows that they must compromise in certain areas, and it's just really about ensuring that you're clear about what you feel is right. And if you're doing that, then the people must decide whether they want to go on that journey with you.
I think you're right, and I also think the problem is not just so much, or Albin Kurti does what he wants, and we can't sort of rein him in or whatever. And I think that's the problem. I think the international community has to accept at some point, Kosovo is a sovereign country, and yes, you did do a lot to help them, and your input is very much still needed, but he is an elected official, and he calls the shots, not somebody sat in Brussels, and certainly not a spokesperson, And I think this is part of the issue as well, their expectation to have a leader who does whatever they say, no matter what, I think that's part of the problem as well.
And those situations never work. And we've seen plenty of examples of where people believe that just because the leader has either been appointed or is hugely supported by certain members of the international community, that suddenly is going to be acceptable to people within that country, and they end up without the agency that they need, and therefore they can't actually govern at all because they don't have the mandate. And we've seen plenty of examples of that. But I should probably also declare that Albin Kurti has written the foreword to the Albanian version of Under a Feather.
Oh, cool! Really?
I know he's written the book, and I checked with him 10 days later when I saw him at something else last year, and he said he'd read it. So I'm really delighted that he's written what he's written about it, and in that sense endorsed the book. But I think you're right that as a leader, you have the mandate from the people, and it's up to the people who to be in that position.
Another issue that's on the table is Kosovo's recognition. We talked about this earlier, the lack of recognition. That is going to ultimately hinder its membership of NATO, its membership of the United Nations, its membership of the European Union. I've read Spain could be the next country which is going to possibly recognise Kosovo's independence formally, officially. What are your views on this? We haven't seen much movement recently with this. Do you think Spain could happen? Are we going to see any movement in any other countries? What are your views on recognition?
I think there has to be an acceptance that the current stalemate between Belgrade and Pristina, between Serbia recognizing Kosovo and accepting the reality is a long way off, particularly with the backdrop of what's happening with Ukraine and the growing influence of Russia in the politics of the Western Balkans. So I think it's up to individual member states. I see absolutely no reason whatsoever why countries in the European Union can't recognise Kosovo, because the reason for their delays are so narrow, so essentially national in their own countries, but by not recognising Kosovo, so much more harm being done to the advancement of the Western Balkans as a whole. And let's face it, what we're trying to do is bring a degree of stability to an area that over the last 30 years has been very unstable, and as we know, continues to be unstable, not just in terms of the relationship between Kosovo and Serbia, but elsewhere as well. So for me, again, realpolitik is really important, and it's not a naive comment. Spain recognising Kosovo doesn't mean that suddenly the Basque region is going to run off and put up barriers and build a wall, and break themselves off from Madrid.
Catalonia, yeah.
People who want that to happen, of course, but the reality is that all that's going to happen is that there is going to be a strengthening of security in a region that needs as much stability as it can get, even if the two protagonists perhaps don't come to an agreement. But if they agree, that's fine. Everybody else can still carry on. But international politics is and international relations is it's not as simple as that. And
what you said,
I know that.
What you said earlier really hit the nail on the head, and that was about the generation needs to change, because we still have generations in both countries who were actively involved in, the entire war, whether it was in the Ministry of Propaganda or active fighting, and I think until that, along with the sort of emotional volatility that comes along with it, until that is not in the picture so much, I don't think it's going to be very difficult to move on. I want to ask you my last question regarding your book. What do you want Albanian people to take away from this? Why should they read it, and what is the message you want them to take away?
Oh, well, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for people in Albania to understand what has happened to what was happening to those people in Kosovo, who of course share such strong heritage and language and culture, what it was that they were having to experience. And no other book had been written about that time. It was a view from inside, essentially inside an organization that in itself was so hugely respected across Kosovo and the wider region. And so to actually get a sense of how things can go wrong so quickly when there is a lack of appropriate cultural sensitivity and a lack of emotional intelligence, I think, in some ways, having the opportunity to read that and see and read that and see for themselves essentially what happened in Kosovo over that 6 months, I think really puts everything in context about where the Kosovo Security Force is now, because it's a huge success story in Kosovo, and it started on its knees, yet now and has been for some time, it's a really strong element of the country, and one that the country is very proud of. And I think purely from a historical perspective, seeing how far they've come and just understanding the challenges that they had to overcome to get there, that's captured in the book. And so yeah, of course, I'd encourage everybody to buy a copy.
And it is a great book. Like I said at the start of the interview, it does provide background context and information for people who want to understand more about what's happened now and also what's going wrong at the moment as well. Aid, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Alice.
Alban, welcome to Inside Albania, all the way from London. Is it sunny? I'm sure it's not.
It's beautiful and sunny.
Really?
It's a wonderful weather. I'm expected a bit cold and somehow windy, but the breeze is still, quite bearable, and it's lovely. Yeah.
Being British, I have to start with complaining about the weather, you know. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few things today, but I want to start with something relevant sort of to the news and the general discourse at the moment, and that is the housing prices in Albania. Given an example, my house, it's not a new apartment, it's a Enver Hoxha era apartment. I bought it in 2022, I think. Yes, 2022. It's increased by 45% since then in value, which I find just staggering. But this does seem to be in line with, you know, the rate house prices are going up throughout most of the country. And this is really high, and people are complaining. Albanian people are saying, you know, I'm priced out of the market. I can't afford to rent. I can't afford to buy. I can barely afford a deposit. You know, in the region, Albania is one of the countries where it would take people the longest to save up their disposable income to get on the housing ladder. This is quite a challenging situation, and I just want to ask you, as an Albanian person, as someone who has a lot of knowledge about this sector as well, why do you think we're in this situation? Is it demand, as people say? Is it because people have gone on a building frenzy? Is it because of money laundering? What's behind it?
See, normally one may speculate for many reasons, but I do believe that there are two key principles here. First is the huge influx of foreigners entering Albania that in a way have raised demand, and by raising demand, they have somehow influenced the overall, let's say, market situation, the sector. Second, basically, we have, in the meantime, a huge number of constructions that do not, in a way, respond just to the demand. The construction sector anticipates the demand. So, as we talk, there might be roughly 170,000 apartments in Tirana alone that have been built and still wait for a buyer. Crazy. And in the same time, you have a raise in terms of price, because to some extent, the quality of demand has improved, although the demand as such, you know, has grown, but not with the speed of action taken by the investors in the sector. Surely, I mean, the question, has the money laundering activity assisted or used the construction sector? This is something that can be legally viewed. Are there loopholes? And the answer is yes, they are. They are, because it has to do with the way investments, in a way, are somehow sold out, meaning that you start buying property before the property has even got a permit. Even the government did that, not just individual construction. I mean, the project where the government basically is part of, in Durrës, there was not yet a final permit in place, and hundreds of flats in Durrës were already sold in Dubai, Emirates. For that reason, the practice has already found, let's say, quite a large national acceptance, and is due to that somehow then we have also cases of mismanagement of consumer relationships, as much as, let's say, in terms of what strikes me is not the fact that the prices are going higher. The problem is that the quality is not going higher. So we don't sell yet systems where people may live. We sell simply walls and bricks. So, and this doesn't add value to the price of property.
No.
But when it comes to the growth in market, basically, I mean, it was natural that the approach of a country to enter the European Union was somehow accompanied by the expectations of a market raise, you know. And this has been valid also for Bucharest. This has been valid for Budapest. This has been valid all around, let's say, Eastern Europe, you know. But at the same time, if you keep in mind, I mean, the British market, which I happen to know a bit better due to, I mean, my activity in this field.
We'll get to that.
What I tell you is that you got 93 years consecutively that the market's growing with a 7.9% minimum, you know, and this makes that flats that were bought in the 70s for 25, 30,000 pounds cost now between 600 to 800,000, you know,
More,
because
yes.
market maintaining a certain control and even pressure on the supply side has in a way helped parties to, let's say, structure the market in a that, and they've made it. You see, properties in this case are drivers of wealth for certain populations.
Yes.
They are not just assets.
No.
They are how a family transfers wealth in time.
I think,
so, and we got to improve a bit also the view we have on the sector and on the assets of it.
I think that you say, oh, you know, foreigners coming here have driven up the prices, and I do agree with that. But I also think under that foreigner umbrella, we must include the diaspora. There is a new apartment block that's been built behind my house, and most of it was bought off plan by people from the diaspora who were buying 1, 2, 3 units to rent to foreigners or for Airbnb and things like that. But I think the liquidity, the amount of money that the diaspora has, you know, a lot of them are looking to buy property in Albania because they see it as an investment and they want an extra anchor to home. And I think this is driving up the prices as well, especially if they're buying sort of 2, 3 units. You know, they have the money to spare. So it's not all my fault, is what I'm trying to say.
It's good that somehow Albanians, from wherever they are, in a way, try to rebuild ownership on their own country. And this, I believe, should serve as well as a driver into the nation's growth. But on the other hand, I do think that, in a way, I mean, this influx of people, meaning the attractiveness of Albania in the touristic sector, shall not be forever.
Yes.
So we have to prepare ourselves that in the next decade, we're not going to have the same amount of people. It has happened to all globally well-known, renowned destinations.
Yes.
And so Albania needs to prepare for that as well.
Now, you mentioned your experience in the UK in the property sector. You're in London at the moment. You have a project called List for Free. Can you just give us a short rundown of what this concept is and why you're doing it in the UK as well, not in Albania?
Two things: market predictability and safety in the market first, and second, basically, you're talking about a much richer market to some extent when it comes to volumes. Being a disruptive concept, a concept that in a way integrates, I mean, the need for democratizing one of the major sectors, producing 72.8 billion pounds in transactions a year, roughly, in the UK. I do believe that every individual, 38 million homeowners in the UK, basically have the right and deserve the right not to be somehow instrumentalized by a couple of big marketing companies that in a way limit their access to the market, you know, due to a pricing for listing. And we offer this for free, but at the same time, there are a few more novelties that the project introduces, including a real, I mean, customer-centric solution, because normally we help people find, we help people to raise financing and also to close a deal and make all these three steps in a much easier and faster way. And at the same time, is saving roughly in commissions about £9,000.
It's a lot.
While also agents also would be saving like 1.4% of their commissions. On the other hand, what I believe is going to be really the novelty in the project is we are trying to, in a way, identify, and for that reason, we are adding into the project a segment that has to do with the green value of the property. By measuring the green value of the property based on the EPC, on the Energy Performance Certificate, a feature that is now found everywhere in the EU and very soon is going to be in Albania as well. The Energy Performance Certificate basically allows someone to measure how much energy has this property saved. And you may convert it in carbon credit, in CO2, which has not been emitted, right? And this thing has value if you convert it in carbon credit allowances. The same do the hydropower plants, the same do all kind of energy generation facilities around the globe. So they go to the market with the so-called packages of carbon credit allowances that are quoted in a global stock exchange. We want to basically give access to each and every household to go to the market with a green bond, this energy value of their property, this green energy value of property. And with this fraction that can be between 1-2% up to 7% in the best scenario. You are talking here of an input, meaning that you give every family access into some money they have, and they did not know to, right? And overall, for the UK alone, we are talking about a market size of roughly, the inventory of the residential properties in the UK is 11.2 trillion pounds. If only 2% were to be green value in these properties, we are talking about 200 billion pounds that you give in the hands, you give in the ownership to each and every household in the UK. But apart from the fact that you assist the government to also meet the net zero target, which is a highly important goal.
Why can't this be replicated in Albania? Okay, you talk about market size, but these sound to me like things which would really benefit Albanian people, and especially meeting green targets, freeing up liquidity and property, having a more democratic approach to buying and selling, cutting out agents, which I personally think are partly responsible for the impending crisis we're facing in Albania when it comes to house prices. Is there not a point, if you prove the concept in the UK, can you not bring it back to Albania to help people here?
We have, in a way, tested it in Rotterdam at Erasmus University and also in Netherlands as such. We have made this proof of concept actually in the Netherlands, as much as we are now putting it in life, let's say, in the UK, as I am concluding now, thanks to a European funded project, let's say, the solution for the calculation of this value, right? Which is a A-class asset. Financial asset that basically shall go to the market and trade it as carbon credit allowance. But we replicate it throughout Europe as well as in Albania. What we lack of in Albania, and I'm going to be frank and open to you, is the guarantee that normally you have a channel, meaning that informality is the enemy of good ideas in a market like Albania. So we need to make sure that no informality is allowed. As we talk, a lot of informality is allowed there.
But I think things like this, they can incentivize people to move away from informality. If you have structures and systems like this, and even just the platform at its basic core level, I think this can facilitate a move away from informality, because you can say to people, well, actually, if you follow this route, it's better for everybody involved and for you financially, because that's what people want, isn't it? The money in their pockets.
You're right, but England has been the school of the world for that, and basically has taught everyone how to basically trade. And this is the reason why you have such a solid and well-standing, say, market in let's say, real estate market in the UK. Because of their very systematic and well-organized and structured, let's say, process. Through you have the EPC taking place, you have the RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, now supporting the process, and you have a myriad of other institutes, the solicitors, and a very functional, let's say, Royal Land Registration Office. And it's for that reason that you can really predict, you can really look into the things, and it's impossible that in a place where every house is being sold for, say, £400,000, you claim to sell something for 50 or 80, 80,000. This is the of it. It's a much more solid market. The same concept of institutional regulation, and control should be in place in Albania as well. If we were to bring it in Albania. So.
I want to ask as well. Let's look more broadly. I know of many entrepreneurs that are going with these great ideas, you know, and they're going to the UK or other European countries and starting up there instead, you know, and I keep thinking, oh, you know, Albania's a bit behind in many areas when it comes to innovation and things. And I'm wondering why this is. I mean, okay, fundamentally, there's more money in other countries. But are there any other hurdles? You know, what are the big obstacles which is resulting in this sort of brain drain of innovation and ideas to other countries?
I wouldn't say that Albania is behind when it comes to money or access to money. I would say that Albania has grown significantly in terms of support to startups, right? And in this framework, if I were to be deploying something in the Albanian market, I would not hesitate at all, you know, to bring this forward. And Albania's got a beautiful startup agency. Albania's got, I mean, very keen institutions now, including the ministry that is looking much better into new ideas and projects. So, and the country has been appealing a lot, let's say, other players, including Plug and Play and including, let's say, other structures. Flushed was here as well, you know. So important players somehow have started to look into Albania as a ecosystem of interest. What I would say is that somehow is not that the hindrance. You know, we basically need, I do believe we need to have what is lacking off in the country is a structure of VCs and a structure of financial drivers that are not institutionalized through government assistance, etc. You know, but normally the ideas bring them, you know, in a country, not the way around. So I do expect that somehow certain people, including Mira Murati or people of a high profile, will in a way somehow make it more attractive to VCs, especially from, I mean, let's say, be it Silicon Valley, etc. I mean, to bring them here. I'm currently talking to a number of VCs and other financial, I mean, important players here in the UK in regard of this initiative, or this for free. And I find I'm lucky to somehow find myself in the Silicon Beach, which is Bournemouth, right? You know, and as much as I find it very appealing, you know, and very, 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 very convincing to be talking to people who really have confidence. And this is one of the elements Albania needs as we talk, is confidence in its own product. This lacks.
So you're confident that things will improve, the market will mature, people will start to see Albania as a more viable option. Alban, thank you, and thank you for your enthusiasm and your ideas as well. And I hope one day we can see them in Albania as well, because I still think this list for free idea is fantastic and would bring about big change in the Albanian ecosystem. So let's hope. Thank you.
I so thank you, and my congratulations for your success. I mean, in the media, you've really made it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Enjoy London.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all for this week. You can follow Inside Albania every Saturday at 4 o'clock on Euronews Albania, on demand on our YouTube channel, Euronews Albania, or across all major podcasting platforms. Until next time, Mira Pavshev.